Auto-believers of the television programming. A 33 with a double E, yeah. WWWF. Now you're out of breath. It's the mask of the beast, mask of the beast, mask of the beast, mask of the beast. It's the mask of the beast, mask of the beast. Faceless cock, another NPC.
Okay, that is Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms, Mask of the Beast. The most disastrous typo ever. Probably purposeful. Nobody noticed, they all accepted it. Let's see what we are looking at here. Now, we're only on 2 platforms. We're kind of truncated at the moment. And we're going to fix everything here. The raft will be righted in about 2 weeks. Just waiting for that first paycheck to come through, and you're going to see we're going to purchase a lot of the books up front, open the stores wide, and the eBay store is doing very well. But once we add in a lot of copies of the World Stage Deprogramming Guide and Autohoaxology 101, it'll take off. We're joined here by Polly Coffin, Let's Go, X322, Joe Fior, Copacetic, Frank Murr, Claptrapism. Says Taco Bell meat is 33% fake. Well, aren't the McDonald's breakfast burritos baby meat? They have some kind of a deal with Planned Parenthood, I assume. I mean, I hear all these things, McDonald's being human meat, and people just talk about it like, yeah, they serve human meat. I don't eat there. It's like, if I really believed that, I would be calling the cops. If I thought there was even rats, I would call the health department. I wouldn't just blindly let my fellow Americans or whatever, my friends and family, eat human meat all day. But that's how a lot of truthers are. It's just like they're in the know. And they accept these things and they live with it. And that's pretty weighty to have to carry that around with you, knowing that you live in a world of unwitting cannibals. Lesko says eBay needs more art. Yeah, I've been painting all day. In fact, that's the reason why we won't have a lot of time now. I've been processing orders. Okay, Claptrapism says Illuminati game has fast food meat card. Yeah, sure, but here's one of the things to remember. The conspiracy culture, all the Illuminati playing card stuff, all of that stuff in general is designed to be the counter narrative to the mainstream. So you can't just believe it. You can't just automatically believe the alternative. And I'm glad you brought this up because today the thing I wanted to really talk about is the political horseshoe as it applies to the red pill, blue pill concept. So the idea of the political horseshoe isn't mine. It's kind of this old idea that I used to completely dismiss. I thought it was ridiculous, that it was oversimplified to say that there's a point where the far left and far right are very close to one another than either is to the center. This is called the horseshoe theory, and it suggests that the political continuum at its edges, at its fringes, tend to resemble one another. And I noticed this was pretty clear with the Soy Boy versus Proud Boys. I was like, okay, you got boys, Arrested Development, competing for the favors of daddy government. I could see how this could be that they're the same. What's the difference between Antifa and Proud Boy? Same masks, same basic outlook. I mean, their whole thing is, if you ask me, one could be playing the other. It's just a matter of changing the color of the uniform. But they both favor the same type of, group action. They get kind of agitated in the street. They're the fringe, and we call them that for a reason. But the question, or the point here, is that both of them begin to resemble one another, and they seemingly are both competing for the same group of people in the middle. Like they want, for example, the right is trying to bring all the blue pill sleepers to the right by waking them up. The left is wokeism, and they are doing the same thing. So what I have here is, in the middle is a blue circle. It says World Stage, Blue Pill, Dreamers. And this is the vast majority. And then the red ring is labeled Red Pill, nightmare version of the blue pill. Or on the left side, wokeism. And I'm going to start calling them wokers. Rhymes with jokers, kind of like it, wokers. So the wokeism is their version of the dream world, which is just as nightmarish as the red pill version. So you have left-wing fringe wokeism and right-wing red pill trutherism. So individuals that awaken from the dream are routed back to a world stage centric perspective. So the last point I made about how they're each focused with converting the dreamers, that's what I mean. Instead of leaving the world stage construct, the people who see that it's BS are gatekept with either red pill, controlled op ideology, or critical race theory and wokeism. But both of these paradigms route the straying freethinkers back into the point where they're staring at one another and focused on the people in the middle. Their backs are to the truth, which is where we are, which is post-world stage, back from the screen, objectivism, which doesn't exist in their world. Okay, let's see who we are joined by. Nicotrama says Lloyd Miller and his minions are going to hate this presentation. We know Lloyd Miller is pretty adamant and he's pretty convinced that he's right, and that's fine. He thinks that I might have discredited myself by not being anti vax. But what I'm suggesting is that anti vax is the counter narrative to pro vax. And if it's split down the middle, just like that, then you're looking at what I would call a guardrail. And my idea of the guardrail is that it keeps people focused on the stage, and I can see that the political horseshoe theory describes it in the exact same way. Continuing here, we are joined by Pippi Langstroth, says Toe Telly, spelled like it sounds. Claptrapism asks, does New Mexico want to ground up everyone's guns into Starbucks meat protein coffee additives? Yeah, apparently guns are banned here for like a month or something. Second Amendment be damned. First Amendment, doesn't matter. The main thing here is safety, and some child was shot, supposedly. Now, I don't even dispute the story necessarily. There are many instances of road rage types of shootings, and there's a lot of death. I mean, I'm not a denialist of anything that actually happens, but it is kind of interesting that they tested that out here. We do have a lot of interesting political agitation that happens here. It's kind of ground zero for a lot of the MAGA going violent stuff as well. I was surprised nothing came of it. I thought it was sort of a test. But I don't think it really made a big difference. This isn't a really big place. I think it was a safe place to test it to see what the reaction would be. And honestly, the reaction was pretty tame, if you ask me. I didn't see a lot of outrage. I think a lot of people here actually agreed with it. In fact, a lot of people, that's something to remember. Truthers get really agitated about lockdowns and masks and pokies and gun grabs and censorship. But you have to remember that more than half the country agrees with that. It's their boot on your face. That's pretty much how it always is. And I always see this like people like, oh, look, there's a mass movement. People are waking up. It's like, no, the other half is trying to oppose what you're doing. It's designed this way. It's designed to be perpetual, this warfare. It's never going to be reconciled. There was never this desire to save everyone, to vax everyone. It was always meant to be 50%. They want it to be split. They want it to be a division between saved and unsaved. And again, what I'm suggesting here is that individuals that awaken from the obviously fallacious blue pill dream, and most people don't, but for most, and this is why you see the info warriors types, Alex Jones types, pointing out that these people are asleep. They're too addicted to football and pharmaceuticals. They can't see it. And I look at that as, yeah, they have a valid point, but this red versus blue is another false dichotomy because neither of them is awake. The red pill is a false awakening, just as false as wokerism. And this is a fascinating area to look into, this perfect schism here, because it's just a strange reflection on every single level. And I've been going through this for some time. How one has this traditional concept of sin, the other one has replaced it with the virus, and how it's pretty much a mirror image of the other. So let me go ahead and go into the article here that this is attached to. My Substack is timosman.substack. Needles versus guns, dialectical Psy-War madness. This article is called The Vaxacaust Denialist. And I figure we might as well start. I said that we're going to take this auto hoax methodology to the world stage, but I don't mean we're going to go wake up the blue pillars or try to tell them everything's fake. They won't understand. They don't have the right frame of reference. Oh, instead, my suggestion is let's go from the outside in. Let's start with the red pill. Don't even bother with the woke. If they're on the left, they're married to Big Brother. There's no saving them. The best that could happen to them is they go back to sleep in the blue pill dream world and stop being activated to destroy everything that's good. But the red pill, they are salvageable. So I want to start off by saying that I'm a Vaxacaust denialist. It's not real. I'm sorry to disappoint misanthropes, doomers, and dupes that had their morbid fantasies really just let down over the last 3 years. Vaxageddon is a terrorist script meant to scare the political right about the political left, just as they are scared of the guns on the right. One side fears the other will shoot them with AR-15s. and the other side is terrified of COVID-19 vaccines. The left refers to the epidemic of gun violence using virology lingo, and the right talks about social contagion as a spreader of leftist ideals. Each side accuses the other of causing an outbreak they must quarantine against. We see this reflected in many different issues going on, even with book banning. You're talking about blocking people from ideas from the other side. So the needles versus guns is one of the mind control media's primary dialectical games. Pro-vax anti-gun versus anti-vax pro-gun. And people are compartmentalized like this. Needles represent the passive reception of the cure via bodily penetration by the state. Guns represent active self-defense or offense against the state. You'll notice that many of the patriot types see guns as a firewall against tyranny. So one is passive, one is active. And this is all tied into their relationship to big government, because whether one is on team needle or team gun is determined by one's relationship with government as savior. This also applies to one's relationship to borders. Pro-vaxxers are paradoxically open border advocates, which doesn't make sense if they're trying to lock everything down and you want only vaccinated people coming in. But no, pro-vaxxers are open border, which makes sense given their porous boundaries with the government. Open skin, open borders, whereas anti-vaxxers are closed borders and pro-gun. And this also ties into the defense of the home, the border of the home. Can you defend it, or does government have to? By the police. The leftists believe that only the police can defend your home border, not you. Your immune system can't defend you. No, the government's immune system has to. And then we have to have open borders, not national borders. And it's perfectly split down the middle, and it has to do with relationship to Big Brother and whether or not you're within the idea that you can merge with Big Brother, as they have. They married it, is what I'm saying. So my point being here, though, is the Vaxacaust is a hoax. And the Vaxacaust pushers have already moved the goalpost several times. These days, it's about a percentage or a death spike. The mass die-off or the mass sterilization never happened. Anti-vax was clearly an overreaction, and I think it's a waste of energy that could be directed to media deconstruction, starting with outer space. We need more people focused on that. I think our priorities are scattered because of a lack of cohesion in the alt-fringe media world, and we can fix it once we get everyone off this political horseshoe and the easy-to-decode Illuminati mind games. 9/11 was a total hoax, and yet we still have people fighting to defend the existence of fake dead people. And this is an axiom for auto-hoaxology. Fake dead kids' lives don't matter. Fake dead people, their lives don't matter. And at this point, Psywar ignorance is a choice. Something else, there are many scapegoat narratives that crumble when you debunk these events. And these scapegoat narratives drive the factions of the mind war. You can all recall how post 9/11, the whole thing was about the stealth jihad, Muslims taking over radical mosques, they're taking over the schools, they're getting in government, Obama's a stealth Muslim. You've heard all this stuff. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the radical Islamic caliphate taking over subversively? Stealth jihad was a big thing. Nobody cares. It disappeared. But did we get rid of radical Islam in the world, or was it fake from the very beginning? My point being, these are mind war fictions based on scapegoats, and they just phase them out. And this is why Hitler fans hate me, because they love their dancing Israelis did 9/11 to blame Muslims to create a war narrative. They love that. And when you break down that event, it kills that scapegoat narrative. Now it's not a whodunit, it's a what is it, it's a hoax. So we destroy their group's purported purpose to exist. You have all these sheeple gathered together because there's a bad guy they need to gang up against, and we're like, no, the bad guy's a hoax. And the people who chase scapegoats and red herrings are always on the political horseshoe. And these are all world stage compatible narratives. So this political horseshoe consists of things like, yeah, of course the media is lying. It's because these people control the media. Take this red pill. And then you're like, wait a minute here. Those people are creating wokeism. Let me go oppose them. So instead of leaving the world stage and all of its BS, nope, you get routed back into it, and now you're in ideological warfare with the other side. The IPS off world stage perspective is far above that kind of mind game that they're caught in. I examine anti-vax, Vaxageddon with the same critical approach with which I do 9/11 or Sandy hoax. Anti-vax is a controlled opposition movement, and I base this simply on its specific right-wing bias and this gun versus needle dialectic. It's too perfect to be organic. And even if there is a point to it, even if there was some kind of a thing attached to it beyond just the mind war, I would still say it's controlled op. Now, last week somebody in the chat called me Tim Gates, and they said I was making Daddy Bill Gates happy, and I'm getting big checks from Pfizer. It's like, meanwhile, I'm applying for a cashier job. So this kind of us or them attitude is from a cultish mindset. And I'm suggesting a lot of these narratives that have scapegoats are cults. And these controlled opposition agents are part of limited hangout operations. So the Vaxageddon believers assume that you have to be a paid agent of Big Pharma to not agree with them. It's like being called a big oil shill for not believing in global warming. Oh, you don't believe in the wrath of globe? Big oil must be giving you money. Now, I think many undergo a partial schizoid break from objective reality. We already talked about how the masses, the mainstream mediated mind, is already cut off from objective reality. They destroyed that in 1946 with the atom bomb. They destroyed the objective reality from the perspective of the masses. It's why I call it the dream world. But there are instances where the people who are not part of the dream world get into their own little break from reality, their own little echo chambers that drift away from the mainstream. And so the wokers and the red pillars are both in this boat, where they go into a more extreme version of the dream, which I refer to as a nightmare. And it's because they go deeper through the screen in their search for truth. But sanity and peace of mind can only exist in the opposite direction from the screen. Only the subtractive and skeptical take can provide a reasonable assessment. And what I mean by this is that you have to reject the basic premise for their big stories. You have to understand their frame of reference, or you're partially buying into it. Here's a quote from William J. Casey, CIA director. "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Yeah, it's complete. Mission accomplished. Everything they believe is false. The world stage is built on an edifice of falsehood. Its parameters, its boundaries are all based on lies and myths and malinformation. And this is just a fact. We're living in an augmented reality created by the power elite. And they know that a portion will see through it. So the woke and the red pill sides of the spectrum are traps to catch straying minds within their political horseshoe. Let me catch up on your comments. Nicotrama says, "I will buy the fake Dead Kids Lives Don't Matter t-shirt." Okay, I was waiting until somebody said they would actually buy it before I was going to actually order some copies. In fact, maybe I should have a designer do it. We have a designer here. Fake Dead Kids Lives Don't Matter is a shirt that I did make with some AI generated stuff, but it's just too creepy. Okay, continuing. Claptrapism says, "Haven't you seen the videos of news anchors passing out?" Yeah, that's propaganda. That's truther bait. And you took it. Okay, continuing. Clockwork 113 says Vaxacaust. Yeah, I'm a Vaxacaust denier. And they get mad at me for it. And I'm like, well, look at what you deny. And what my point of it is that this is a terrorist script. We're talking about mind war based on fear. I mean, they don't only use fear, they use intrigue, they use fear, they use every human emotion. But just this idea that, yeah, there's millions of people dying and the mass media's not talking about it, and the kids in Maui have disappeared, and we're waiting for Tim Ballard to go save them, but he's too busy groping his pretend wives. Like, that's just a lot of negativity to carry around. That's why I go with the auto hoax, the skeptical perspective, ataraxia, as the original skeptics called it. Being free from the Psywar. You can unplug. You can go post-world stage. And so what we're doing here is very academic. I say this is inactivism. We would never get in the mud. They say never wrestle with a pig because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. That's what the world stage is. It's a big pig pen. Wee says, why is it so important for the Wizards of Oz to direct the masses' consciousness into disempowerment and division? I think it's for this reason. I think that humanity is under quarantine, and they can't physically leash us all, but they can put shepherds there. They can keep us shepherded. And when you get into their symbolism, it's kind of fascinating how so many of their sun gods are shepherds. And I think that the elite see themselves as shepherds of the sheeple. And my point here is that I think we're quarantined so we don't access the resources that they're going to claim are coming from asteroids that they're mining. I mean, for all we know, the elite have slaves on Mars already, and Mars is just a continent that we don't know about. That's what I'm thinking here. And so we're talking about the political horseshoe and how it keeps you mentally in the world stage, but it also keeps you physically in the world stage. It's all based on this same closed system. And I've done this lie world order diagram that describes the same exact situation. How it is a mind war, but it is also about keeping you in a augmented reality that could be any shape they want, any size, any number of continents. It's almost purely subjective and they control it. You know, the first Roman, I think one of the first Roman geographers actually claimed that you couldn't go south past the equator because it'd be too hot and you would burn up. And I'm like, what a fascinating story, a firewall. And then the flat earth movement comes up and they say, oh, you can't go past Antarctica because it's an ice wall. So what is it, a firewall or an ice wall? And then what's next? All right, continuing, joined by Cub Star. Linda Curtis says, God blocker Tim Gates. Yes, I'm a God blocker, which means I deny the Mandela effect, and apparently the Mandela affected believe that they're shifting their way to finding God or becoming God. I'm not quite sure what it is. The world stage is a sim, says Linda Curtis. 100%. It's a simulation, but that doesn't mean there's not the objective reality. The best way to describe this is that, we exist in two worlds. We all do. We have our mental and then our physical, and they don't always correlate. And if someone's mental reality doesn't, we call them insane. My point being, collectively, we have adopted, I think, a collective schizoid affective disorder. And it's a byproduct of trauma-induced mind control, PTSD. But yeah, mankind is very pliable. We're space cadets. We're under a spell. And most people wouldn't believe it because it's just too big to fathom. Yeah, I think you have to really, I don't know, you have to really kind of let these ideas sit around in your head for a minute and think about what does it really mean if they fake the nukes? Like, on the one hand, it's good news. Hey, it's great. No one can push a button and vaporize you. But on the other hand, it means that whoever controlled the media has put mankind into a hostage situation based on a lie, but they have effectively redefined geopolitics on a big lie. So it's like, wait a minute here, this makes perfect sense then, if you frame everything else around that. My point being, we are in a subjective world, and they control it. So the only objectivists in the world, and I've been saying this for some time, are the auto-hoaxers, the absolute media skeptics. We're the only ones who are truly objective because we all agree on what the objective reality is, but we disagree on the framed or the filtered version. And that's because the masses, of course, believe that the screen is a window to the world so you can see all around it, when in fact it's a filter, and always has been, because it contains within it a number of built-in assumptions. My point being here is that we're the only truly objective people in the world, because you have to, I think, to claim that, you have to have stepped back from that screen a bit. Although we could include the perps. And this was brought up in Newsbenders. I talked about this the other day, how the Newsbender said that 99.8% of the population wouldn't understand their conversation, and the rest of them work for them. So it's like, between us and the Newsbenders, we're the only ones with a firm grasp on reality. All right, continuing here. 777 says, many people would take that shirt the wrong way. Yeah, the people who take it the wrong way, who think that fake dead kids' lives matter, would, yeah, I can understand how you would. I think you're right. They would think that we're saying that the real dead kids are fake dead kids and therefore their lives don't matter. They would totally take it the wrong way. That's a good place to explain it to them. Maybe even hand them a card. Well, you have to listen to Infinite Plane Radio for some mind war inoculation to really get it. But I'd like to hear someone make the argument, and maybe we'll do this in a public debate. Do fake dead kids' lives matter? I mean, apparently Alex Stain thinks so. He went to Uvalde and he publicly wept at the city council meeting. He wept at the pile of teddy bears in front of the school. And I sent him a text and I said, fake dead kids' lives don't matter, and he blocked me. So I'd like to debate it. Tell me, what are the merits of fake dead kids and why do their lives matter? And moreover, why do their lives matter more than the real kids who are undergoing hyper-realistic mass shooting drills which are known to cause PTSD? That's child abuse. So are you on team child abuse? You kind of are if by default you're siding with fake dead kids. Tia Roberta says you are an EGI skeptic. Yet Tia Roberta is a transvestigator. And I don't trust any of them because they have so many false positives they don't address. In fact, I would say the transvestigation thing is very similar to the reptilian thing that used to be around. But I don't know. I'd have to have one of them actually call in and prove to me they're not just LARPing. It's a fascinating phenomenon if you're not aware of it. Because you have a whole group of people who have just arrived at this conclusion that we live in this two-tiered society and that the rulers are all, just the opposite of what they present themselves for some obscure reason. In fact, one of them said that, no, Russell Brand can't be guilty of any of that stuff. She's a woman. And I'm like, wow, that's a curveball. If Russell Brand is a woman, then the whole story is made up. I heard the same thing about Bill Cosby. They said, oh yeah, Bill Cosby's a chick. My question for the people who believe in this is, do you process people this way? Like, I feel like this is the emperor's new clothes. Like, the emperor's naked, but you want to be in the know. You want to pretend like you're sophisticated, so you're like, oh yeah, those are some fine robes. So they throw down a picture of Sylvester Stallone, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a woman. And I'm like, do they really process it? In my head, I'm thinking, if they look at that and they think woman, and they look at Brad Pitt and they think woman, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I asked them, are you attracted then to celebrities of the same gender as you if you aren't generally inclined in such a way, given that you naturally process it that way? And they never really give me an answer. Like, I'd like to ask Tia Roberta her take on this. Okay, let's continue here. Claptrapism says mass shootings never have crime scene photos released to the public. No, they never do. That would be impossible to provide. The best we've had, I think, was the inside footage from Mosque number 2 at Christ Church, where you could clearly see somebody with a spray bottle spraying fake blood on people. Okay, let's see. Let's move on. Tia Roberta says she lives in Rio, full of celebrities. They are odd. Now, here's one of the problems with that whole proposition. Just one example, and I think this was brought up by JLB or something. They'll say, Angelina Jolie's obviously a man. Look at the jawline. Well, then you look at her younger pictures. She had jaw implants. They'll say, oh, look, this person has an Adam's apple, therefore it's a man. Well, this one doesn't. Had it shaved off. Oh, this person's definitely a man. Look at that brow. Well, if they didn't have a brow, you would say they shaved it off. So the whole thing is unfalsifiability. So until they can incorporate that into their outlook, until they can deal with the false positives, I just can't take them seriously. I think they're just kind of weird fetishists at this point. And I'm not sure what it's going to come to next. It was reptilians. Then it was, what was there something else? There was, reptilians was a big thing for some time. I guess they all became EGIs, is what they call them. Ollie Goering says Russell Brand looks like a homeless. No, okay, the whole Brand story is likely a hoax. I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. because I think what we're seeing here is a systematic destruction of an idol that has been put on a pedestal. I think they raised them up and then pulled them down. I think this is a designed psychological operation. I think part of it too is the deconstruction of the patriarchy. And you'll see more about this because this comes on the back of the Barbie thing, Barbie feminism. So, in the wake of Barbie feminism, we have another example of a male dominated culture that let certain individuals get away with stuff. I think it's takedown. And he's probably complicit in it. It's probably his role. Tia says eye socket ratios can't change. See, the thing is about their investigations is they base it on armchair forensic anthropology. But one of the things they can never answer is which skull do you use? Because if you're going to claim that you're ascertaining the biological sex of somebody based on their skull structure or their clavicles or whatever, that's fine. But you need to be a little more specific. What skull are you using? Because there are different classifications for human skulls. There's at least 3. Some go with 4. I took a course on forensic anthropology as part of the Mortuary Affairs 92 Mike training in Fort Lee, Virginia. And we were given some charts that would allow you to reasonably determine what somebody's quote race was based on ratios of femur length to torso and then certain things about the skull. So there's a little nuance that I think is being missed. And I've been misidentified as a woman by these transvestigators like 50 times, and a lot of times it's just a pejorative. Oh, you don't agree with me? Then you're the opposite of what you say. You're one of them. And I'm like, if I'm one of them, then I'm in the Illuminati. That's what you're saying, right? And I'm like, well, how come I don't get paid better? And they say, oh, it's because you're in the Illuminati, but they actually hate you. They've actually told me this. I've had these investigators. And some of these people are nuts. Like, I'm talking like toxoplasmosis levels of crazy, where one of them, and I don't want to say their names, it's like Beetlejuice, they will show up. But one of them maintains that I work with Wonder Woman, the original Wonder Woman. Is it Lydia Curtis? And that Lydia Curtis is in my Discord server. So I hang out with Wonder Woman, who's actually Wonder Man, and then I'm the woman. It's just a bizarre, twisted thing. I don't even like getting into it because we're talking about. Actually, you know what? I will get into it just briefly because I said this. I said the mass mediated mind is already undergoing a schizoid break from reality, but there are instances where truthers do it too. So this would apply to the ones I'm talking about. And Tia, Roberta, this would apply to you as well. Their madness is out of sync, and their echo chambers drift further from reality. That's what I'm looking at here, where they add so much unverifiable onto their frame of reference that it basically distorts everything. And I think this is how madness works. I really think that a lot of the delusions that people suffer from, and delusions are real, and people who have organic brain dysfunctions and real mental illness suffer from these things. Delusions are real, and sane people, mentally healthful people, can actually have delusions. Whether they're disruptive or destructive or not is a whole other story. I mean, look how many people run around saying that JFK is going to save them once he takes off his Donald Trump suit. And these are voters. 777 says they have everyone in politics on both sides obsessed with transgender ideology. Yeah, you know what's fascinating about this is that just as this is the horseshoe, we talk about the political horseshoe. So the far left fringe wokeism has dispensed with the gender binary altogether. They're never going back. In fact, I hear this one podcaster refer to uterist persons instead of women. Now, on the face of it, you're like, okay, so they're just now disassociating sex from gender, and it's pretty complicated. It's actually it's I wouldn't even say it's that complicated. I guess it's just another way of expanding the idea of personality and how subjective it can be. But the new thing is the insistence that others automatically recognize it. But then on the other side, the right wing red pill trutherism, where they veer towards traditional values and they want to uphold the gender binary, yet When they get really fringy, they start looking at every single man and every single woman as the opposite. And they claim they can just see it. They see Donald Trump as a woman. They see Ivanka as a man. They see Hunter Biden as a woman, even though there's 4,000 nude pictures of him. So I'm like, well, what's the difference between the fringy fringe right and the fringy fringe left? They both have fully disassociated sex from gender in their own minds. In other words, this political horseshoe has demonstrated that they are a mirror of each other, that transvestigators and leftists are non binary in the same exact kind of way. And I think they've done this by design. Like, I actually know for a fact that one of the main purveyors of transvestigationism on Twitter is actually a communist, Bernie Sanders supporter who's a professor at a community college in Idaho or something, and pretends to be a Christian trad wife outraged by Hollywood celebrities. It's crazy that people fall for this stuff. Okay, let's continue here. Infinite Plane Trotter says he's the straw man designed to take the fall, a red pill sacrifice. Yeah, you're talking about Russell Brand. I would agree with that. I think we're looking at people who are complicit in their own iconoclastic destruction. And I was making some correlations here. It's fascinating between him, his victim Ellis, his insistence that she read Lolita, and she's 16. And you can compare that with the other Mad Hatter archetype, Marilyn Manson, who had his victim victimized in a video based on Lolita, the Kubrick film. And she was working with him on a script called Alice in Wonderland. Now, the significance is that Alice and the Mad Hatter, it's Persephone and Hades, the kidnapper. So we're looking at this like archetypal story here that has to do with the Spring Maiden's journey into hell and out. And it's been retold through these two different scandals in almost identical ways in terms of the symbols and the dynamics. And I think these things are fake because I was looking at the Manson one and Rachel Wood, and their relationship and the way it was described in the documentary mirrors her role in Westworld, where she had to overcome the man in black to escape this cycle of abuse. It was the same exact story. Manson, the real life version of the Man in Black thing. So I'm thinking this has got to be a takedown. It's got to be some kind of something they're complicit in. And I think what ties it all together is the feminist angle. That's the main thing. Because we're looking at Barbieism, and now Ken is the archetype for the new man, and he's neutered. Barbie's the archetype for the new woman, and she's liberated. And as the Barbie movie ends, she has a functional real body. It's like she becomes a real woman as Ken becomes a doll. And Barbie Land became, or it merged with reality, and Barbie Land is just code for Babylon. If you watch the movie, you would know that Barbie is indeed the whore of Babylon, a new goddess archetype they've introduced to the masses to effect the changes that are in store for us post-reset. Claptrapism says, I want to move to San Francisco so I can vote for Pelosi. Is she even in? I thought she retired. Ollie Goering says, trad wife slang is cringe and fake. It's traditional wife. Gen Zers make trend slangs for real, lol. Yeah, well, the trad thing connects to MAGA, Make America Great Again like it used to be. And MAGA and the Q thing have kind of tied together where what you have with this is the domestic equivalent of the Taliban. It's the MAGA ban. And that's why you see a lot of these right-winger types are actively now against, at the same time, both abortion and they want to lower the age of consent. You have people like Nick Fuentes openly talking about grooming 12-year-olds to get married to 30-year-old conservative men or nationalist men. So they're pushing MAGA ban values that are really, I think, planted there. And I think it's by design. Like they've created this whole thing. And so I'm saying that trad wives is a psyop. And I would even point out this too. It's part of this political horseshoe where the left is like, oh, we got to quarantine against those guys. They're super spreaders. Get into your basements or put on your masks. And on the right, they're like, oh, yeah, that's nonsense. But we got to quarantine against them and their leftist values. So let's go rural. So one of them is like, well, each of them, just like with the guns and needles, they're each trying to quarantine from the other, both mentally and physically. Claptrapism says Barbie had a black female president, best movie ever. Predictive programming. And there's a lot of it. In fact, I'm going to watch some predictive programming tonight. There's a series I watched that was like more than a year ago, Wheel of Time, and that was one among many I noticed that, yes, they're preparing us for President Harris. All right, I have to, yeah, Fed Fuentes is vile, Lean Dion calls it. Fuentes is definitely a clown. I don't believe he believes what he's saying, but I believe that I believe he's a complicit meme dispenser. I think some of these individuals are nothing more than agent provocateurs, and they're given lines. There's no way he believes any of the stuff that he says. He's obviously too close to Ollie Alexander and all these other in this circle, this blackmail circle, that it's pretty obvious if you dig into Fuentes, what he really is, but he's playing a role. Amazing how close he has been to Donald Trump and to presidential candidate like Ye. Like how close to power he gets. That's what's fascinating to me, is that if you want to get close to power, you have to just basically be a mouthpiece for the psychological warfare. And none of them take it seriously. They're all, hypocrites, as you all understand. Okay, this has been great. I have to get to work, but in about 2 weeks, you're all going to see. There's going to be a big change about how we do things here. In about 2 weeks, it's going to be oriented around our reporters, which will be activated. So if you're an IPR reporter and you want a new press pass, which will be at my expense when I get my first check in a couple weeks here, and you want to be activated, you want to be distributing the IPS Insider, we're going to make all that happen starting next month. So go to ips.monster, get on the newsletter, and I'll keep you all up to date with those developments. This is AutoHoax or GTFO, Chief Crow.